Hi, this is Anita from 5 Minutes with Art. One of the stories that's often told about the painter Vincent van Gogh is that he only sold one painting in his lifetime. Vincent van Gogh did die broke, and he died without really seeing how popular he is today. He really only sold one painting, though there has been a record shown of another one of his paintings going to London, and I don't know if that was before or after he passed away. But the art world, generally believes that he just sold one painting. He gave us Starry Night, he gave us Sunflowers, he gave us The Bedroom, died thinking he was a failure. Think about that for a moment. Here's one of the greatest artists that's ever lived. And if I mentioned several times, if you do a search on Google, if you did a search on Google Trends of, popular artists, Vincent van Gogh usually always comes up in the top, one or two or three artists. But he really only sold one painting, The Red Vineyard. And even then, he sold it to a friend. So it wasn't even sold to somebody who walked off the street and said, I love your artwork, I want to buy it. It basically was sold to a friend, another artist, a Belgian artist, on a book that she was the one who bought his painting. She bought it for 400 francs, about 1,000 to 2,000 US dollars in today's money. Think about that for a moment. So she bought it, but it was, not a very expensive painting. And she more or less, almost like she was doing him a favor. I'm going to buy one of your paintings. And this is now displayed in a museum in Moscow. There's some debate that Vincent van Gogh, he did trade some of his paintings for other people's paintings. There was some debate about that. But really, when it comes to like earning money on it, probably more was just one painting that was actually sold. Why did he sell so little? Well, there's a couple of reasons why. One, he was very much ahead of his time, in the art world. If he had lived longer, maybe he would have seen success later in his life. He was constantly moving. He was moving to different places. He was, lived in Netherlands, Belgium, Paris, Louise. He was moving all over France. And so, he was constantly moving. He didn't really have a stable place so much. He was, in an asylum half the time painting. So, he wasn't really out there. He had no real commercial representation, even though his brother Theo did represent him. He didn't have dealers actively seeking his work. His brother Theo, an art dealer in Paris, tried to promote him, but it was tough. It was, very hard for Theo to promote him. But Theo believed in him and kept helping him with finances. But harder for him to sell his work and to promote it. Vincent van Gogh was very socially isolated. He had mental illness. He didn't have many stable relationships. He alienated people. He was probably one of these sort of odd ducks that people thought, who is this guy in the neighborhood? We don't want to be around him. And then on top of that, he cut off his ear and handed his ear to a prostitute in a brothel, and they had to call the police on him. So, people were probably saying, who's this weirdo that cut off his own ear? He had a very short-lived career. He started painting seriously at 27, and he died by 37. So he only really was painting seriously for 10 years. Vincent van Gogh felt like he was being overlooked. He felt like people didn't appreciate his art. But he kept painting anyway. And that's one reason what I really love about Vincent van Gogh is if any of you out there are artists, maybe you feel that way. People don't appreciate your art. They don't understand you. Or maybe there's something else in your life that they don't understand or you feel like you're just not understood. If you can remember the story of Vincent van Gogh, I think we can all learn from this story that here's a man that was very, very misunderstood in his world, that he people just didn't understand him. They didn't know who he was. He was kind of the weirdo, down the street. But yet he turned out to be one of the greatest artists who ever lived. And today has a museum in Amsterdam dedicated to him. But not only that, I think everyone knows his name. I remember when I grew up, one of the sunflower paintings, my mother had a copy of it that was, hanging in our kitchen. It was a, very popular painting during that time. And I think a lot of people loved his art. They saw his art. They felt something when they saw his art. I love Vincent van Gogh. He's definitely one of my favorite painters, if not my most favorite painter. And the more I get to know him and his story, the more I learn to appreciate him and just all he endured and all he went through in his life. We hope that if you're interested in this, we will put in our description a link to our blog post entitled, Why Did Van Gogh Only Sell One Painting in His Lifetime? And this might give you a couple ideas as to why he only sold one painting in his lifetime, and maybe give you some food for thought for yourself in your own life. And what does this mean for you? Because really, art is not just about viewing the paintings. It's about making art be part of who you are. And it's maybe in seeing yourself and the world and those around you in a different way as you view art. That is the power of art. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, that you will subscribe and join and be part of our community where we talk about art, where we study about art, where we learn about art, because art, like I said, it can help you see the world in a different way. Thank you so much for listening.